I think by 2030, we are going to have technology of curing or mitigating 50% plus of the cancer.
Welcome to the Beyond Cuda podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Tatarchuk, co-founder of TensorWave, the AI cloud built exclusively with the latest and greatest AMD GPUs. Joining us on the show today, we have Koosh, who is a serial entrepreneur, an ex-Meta tech lead, and the CEO and co-founder of 310.ai that builds foundation models for large biomolecules. Koosh, man, it's good to have you on the show. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Jeff. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, good to have you, man. Well, we're going to do something different. Most of the show, we start off with just diving straight in to our guest's background, but we want to do something different this time around. We actually want to talk about some of the relevant stuff that's going on in AI today. And there's all kinds of cool topics we could talk about, but I think with the topic that's on the top of everybody's mind today is ChatGPT 5. ChatGPT 5. Would love to. I have my thoughts on ChatGPT 5, but would love to hear what you think, man. Were you impressed by it, or?
I like OpenAI products, the GPT-5. There was a long time waiting for GPT-5. They released a bunch of things from 4 to 5. There were like 100 different versions. In general, when I look at the race, I think as we go further in the AI race, now there are probably, you can say there are 5 players. There's the 5 big players that are left. Basically, there's Google, Meta, OpenAI. And then I think after these 3 are probably the top 3. And then after them are Elon Musk, new company that is probably 4th. Let's say
I'm curious to hear who your 5th one will be. Who's gonna make the 5th position?
the X, first of all, it's still probably behind, but the pace that they're moving is super impressive, right? And you're in the data center business, probably they're doing better than anybody in terms of building that. And the 4th one is probably Anthropic. Anthropic is pretty impressive. And then these are the 5. Probably there are a bunch of startups who are competing. These are as far as LLMs. And then there are obviously there's NVIDIA who they're killing it on the GPU business, but they have also AI teams that they're doing groundbreaking work, but not probably in this scale. And then AWS, Microsoft, they all have a lot of research.
Azure, they're all building their own and trying different ways to get caught up. But what do you think it would take, or what do you think it's going to take to ultimately win the race? Because you mentioned earlier that these are the big players that are putting a lot of compute to training large models to try to get the best evals across every category across the board. Do you think somebody could come from behind outside of those 5 and actually catch up? And number 2, what is it going to take to win and stay in the lead? And is it a zero-sum game? Is there only eventually going to be one winner?
So I think answer to your question, let's dimensionalize. What are the factors, right? I think the factors are data, obviously, who has more data. And when LLMs came, all the investors, that was their favorite factor because it's more tangible and it's more static. But I think basically, at least as far as LLMs, the data is everybody has the same almost data now. Then I think the biggest factor is the AI innovation architecture that comes from who has the best team, who has the best researchers. And now we're seeing all these $10 and $100 million compensation. And I think that kind of makes sense. I think that's the ultimate winning factor. So data, team, and innovation around architecture. And then 3rd is the GPU and the economy of compute, who has the biggest cluster and resources. And these are not isolated factors. It's economy question that data, GPU, and model architecture, they are related to each other. And then the 4th one that I think people talk about it less is all the traditional factors like product and go-to-market. And I think on the product side, clearly OpenAI is winning. think the whole Sam Altman and the team, they have a really good product and go to market. Even as far as the marketing, they're introducing a new DNA of marketing every day. Even the GPT-5 was probably the least impressive.
Launch. Like, it was a I was just watching an interview yesterday with the one of the guys that was originally a part of putting the GPT product together, and he was saying when they launched GPT-3 as a chat, they didn't really know. They didn't really have any expectation on kind of what the form factor of the product would end up being, and he said initially they wanted to call it, um, Chat with GPT-3, and they kind of kept evolving it to where it's at today. And it's interesting, like, we kinda seem to be stuck in the, chat product form factor of, releasing AI, and it's gonna be interesting to see how it continues to evolve past chat.
We have some project that we're working. I talk about Palantir and everything. I think the form factor is going to change. You're going to see many apps inside the LLMs, and some of the apps just build up themselves. I think the form factor is going to change a lot in next even 6 months, and we're seeing a little bit of that in GPT-5. I think basically OpenAI is winning the product, right? They're much better in that game. I think one company that is also getting much better, Anthropic, they brought the Instagram co-founder, and he's a GTM and product thinker. And now I see, like, I don't know if it's him or the Anthropic is getting really good. The product is really good. The transition between text and code is pretty good, and their marketings are pretty good.
Did ChatGPT 5, was it underwhelming for you? Did it hit your expectation, or did it exceed your expectation, or is it too early to tell?
I like OpenAI as a company, and I like the product. This was, let's say, less uh, than my expectation. Some of the pieces was good in image generation. I don't know if it's the new model or I just the image generation was better. I see there are some improvements, right? The orchestration between different models, that was a pain. Like for reasoning, you had to use all three. For this, you had to not all the orchestration happening in the back, and it got faster. That's also an improvement. But overall, yeah, I expected GPT-5 to be a big, yeah. And then wrapping up is basically this. I think OpenAI is winning the product game. Anthropic is doing well. Grok is doing well. They're taking a different approach of more, how do you say, more a free version of LLM, which I like. I think LLM should have less censorship and they should be more honest. And then I think the one that is doing worse than anybody in terms of product and go to market is Google. They're, I think, painfully not doing a good job. I think you keep hearing that Gemini is the best model on the benchmark and all these things, but when you use the product, you don't see it. Every time I use it after 2 minutes, maybe it's me.
I never use it anymore. I used it to test it when they came out with their, like, 1,000,000 token or context window.
Yeah, this I know there's scientists, the engineers, they're still very impressive team, everything that DeepMind does, but when it comes to productization, they have not been as impressive. And there's a $1 trillion question hanging in there. And that is it even, let's say Google has the best chat tomorrow. Can they shut off the main business, which is the blue links that they want to sell as and replace it? And that's the part that uh, it's a very hard question, right? It's a
Mhm.
binary
I'd be
question.
curious to see how their ads have been doing since they've implemented Gemini into the first kind of section of the search. When you search something and then, like, the first paragraph is Gemini and then all of the ads are below that, I'd be curious to see how how well their ads have been doing as a result of that, if they're doing better or worse, or is it just most people are going to OpenAI to now search their product and they're just losing users in general?
If you zoom out, there's another question that I think is even more important, and that is, for 20 years, Google has this. information retrieval machine that generated a lot of cash and no competition, right? So in order to compete with Google, because they had such a big brand and such a big scale, you had to come up with a 10x better product. And for the first time, GPT, what was that? GPT 3, 3.5, the earliest version came 20. That was the 10x better product. The thing is, Google is not that dominant information retrieval machine anymore, right? So they cannot squeeze as much money as they used to. That's I think the big part. Maybe they can put. The thing is, whatever amount of ads is annoying, right? You can, and if you the annoying part about Google before ChatGPT came up for me is like you go like one and a half fold down in the page, you still like ads, like irrelevant
I
thing.
feel like ads were mostly for the ignorant people that didn't know it was an ad.
Yeah, exactly. The people who are
But but even like Google now, like you just scroll way down and you move past the ad. Anyway, I'd be curious to know what the ad revenue is and then how they're going to integrate it into because I know now you can put like AI SEO, I forget what it's called, but you can like LLM SEO onto your website so that it gets pulled into LLMs today.
yeah. And then there's Apple, right? The company that is just failing behind every day. And it's it's very funny actually to look at how they profit. And the only talk in Apple is they're buying Perplexity, which is the only actually AI company that doesn't have a big focus on building models. It's very funny. Like
Yeah, Perplexity is a wrapper on other models. And I just saw, didn't Perplexity just make an offer to buy Google Chrome?
that was a total to me. It
Is
was
that a spoof or is that real? What happened?
I
Was that
think I
real?
think it's a legal slash marketing BS. It's there's nothing. n- Obviously, Google. What was the number? 34 billion, I think.
Yeah, something like that. It was
Obviously,
in the
Google is
30s.
not going to sell the Chrome for. The price is much higher, right? For Google is that number is nothing, right? I don't know. I think there's a legal thing that they want to prove some point that it's beyond my expertise. I don't want to talk, but I think it has to do something with legal and marketing. It has nothing to do with product and technology.
It'll be see who actually wins. And you're right. Is it who can get access to the most amount of data, either, real or, generated, who can get access to the most compute, and then who maintain the dominance in the product sphere. But it also leads to the next question. Sure, this is the fight that we're having here in North America, and we have all of these AI labs that are building state-of-the-art foundation models that take a lot of compute, takes a lot of power to do it. And then we had earlier this year somebody come out of the woodwork with DeepSeek. And, like you mentioned, like they had access to a really talented team of researchers who were able to optimize, quote unquote, a limited amount of compute, whatever that compute amount was, to create a truly, distilled model that performs really, really well. And I mean, you see China like, so yes, like in order to do it, you need to have data, a good team, and access to GPUs. But beyond that, in order for you to get access to GPUs, you need power. And if all of the AI labs were to get access to the amount of compute they wanted to build these models, as well as put their models into production, we literally don't have enough power to power what all of these siloed labs want. And then you have what's taking place in China, where they are, you know, they are building out gigawatts and worth of power over time that will give them access to be able to do more. And so, anyway, what are your thoughts on the U.S. versus China race that's happening right now?
I think the US versus China is, first of all, I think people who have not worked in AI industry, some of them, I think they think China is some nation that is walking back. If you have ever come inside any of these advanced AI labs inside the US, is uh, there are a lot of scientists from China,
That's right.
right? So somebody told me they have more AI researchers that we have like students or something around that. Like they have a lot of talents, and it's not just China. Probably like India, probably like even countries like Russia and Iran. They're really good in math and computer science, and they're catching that part is not. where US is ahead, there is this stack that Peter Thiel actually, I think, introduced. The stack is like at the bottom, as you said, is energy. Sec That's layer one. The second layer are the GPUs, NVIDIA and AMDs of the world. The third one are data centers that are you guys are in that layer. Um, the fourth is foundation models that we're doing for the molecules, the OpenAI, ChatGPT, not ChatGPT, Gemini, blah blah. That's the one that I like most. The fifth one is the one that is getting a lot of attention, especially after Palantir, is all the orchestration, platformization, and verticalization of the AI. And then the sixth one are the applications. I think basically US is obviously ahead in the GPU, is behind in the energy, and the foundation model is ahead. As you see, they're DeepSeek, they have talents that they can compete, and they're building and it comes to like a few dimensions: the reasoning, reinforcement learning, synthetic data generation, new architectures, multimodal. There are all these research that US and China compete, and there are all the complexities. uh, then there is the in the middle, uh, the AIP layers that I think US is traditionally doing that better, and you need to build this vertical solutions across all the enterprises and governments, and US is better in that. And then the applications, usually US has been better, but we'll see. And then the data center that you know better than me. I think that comes to basically who has more GPUs and who has better energy. I think it'd be a close race, very, very close.
Do you think it's an important race? Do you think it's a, because I know some people, they think it's an existential race where we have to, the North America has to maintain AI dominance in order.
I think that is the only thing. Basically, AI is there. There's this Ray Dalio model of their waves that are coming. Their wave of, I don't know, money, and then wave of this technology and that technology.
That's right.
I think AI is the ultimate race, and it's even bigger than US versus China. It's basically whoever. And I kind of like to basically, when we talk about AI so far, we talk mostly about LLMs, and a lot of people I think are confused about it. I think LLM at the end of the day are going to be maximum 30%. I pick a number, 30 to 40% of AI work. There are
That's
many
right.
other types of AI
There's
that
limitations. Like I hear a lot of people say that LLMs aren't going to be the thing that take us to AGI.
LLMs are inherently they're great tools, and they're probably going to be the backbone of communication, digital productivity, and they're going to revolutionize everything. We use it. They're great. They have some obviously limitations. The the data itself is very lossy because human language, the form factor is very lossy. We don't describe things quantitatively very well. That's one thing. LLMs are not focused, they're not specialized. So one of the inherent problems with LLMs are basically each LLM is, I always say it, like it's focused as much as quantum chemistry. It's also focused as much on some diet information as much as it's focused on some celebrity who has dated whose X information, right? When LLMs train, they grab all this information from, and they almost spend almost equal. It's very uniform. The intelligence is very uniformly distributed, which is, I don't think that's good. That's not how the board intelligence works.
That's right.
That's not how our brain works. And it has a lack of hierarchy and reasoning, which is now people are finding solutions around it. But I think basically it's the whole digital, I call it digital, which is LLM, image generation, video generation, everything that is happening in the world. I say that is um 30, 40% of the AI. It's there's the parts that I'm probably more excited about. There's a Okay, very big picture. I think they're LLMs, right? Let's say LLM, digital image, video, all those things that ChatGPT does, Grok, Gemini, all those, right? That's one bucket.
Mhm.
There is a second bucket that are all the tabularized data, massive, there's ads, finance, hedge funds, all those kind of stuff. I put it in the second bucket that I call it more traditional. Ads started using neural networks around 2013 at
Mhm.
Google, and hedge funds started using deep learning in 2014. So in AI world, 11 years is ancient. That's the second bucket, and everything that is about that, right? And then the third bucket that is my favorite, and I think that's the biggest killer application of AI is understanding the world and understanding physics, right? So if you think about LLMs, or what are LLMs are looking at the giant text of the internet, many tokens. You have all these attention networks and all the GPU clusters that you guys are building. You put that on top of this data and it finds all the attentions, all the hierarchy, all the abstraction, and it just gives it back to you in terms of chat. Now, what if you can do that with the word data, with the physics and chemistry? And I split that to two pieces basically. One is I call it big physics, the physics that we can see. Uh, that, for example, self-driving is one part of it, right? It's a physics of centimeters and millimeters and meters and kilometers, the big physics that you can see it with your eyes. And obviously, self-driving is a big application of that. Uh, the robotics, right? It's a huge application. All that word modeling of the words of physics, that's one. And then the second, basically the second subcategory of the third category that I dedicated my life to it, and I think that is the most impactful and important one, is the physics, chemistry, and biology that we don't see, the angstrom scale. uh, Anything that has to do with understanding of molecules and proteins and atoms and even up to quantum scale. I think that's that. I think yeah we I think we should talk about that maybe.
Yeah, well, I wanna dig into that. Well, that leads us perfectly into you. When did the idea for, "Hey, I wanna get into biotech, I wanna get into physics, I really wanna, like, build this in AI," and talk about that jump from leaving Meta and jumping to start your own company.
First of all, my background was I when I was 17 and 18 and 19 until 22, I wanted to become a mathematician. I always thought getting a job is a stupid thing. It's very I thought I want to solve math problems. And I growing up in Iran, becoming entrepreneur is not a cool thing. Growing Entrepreneur means somebody who steals money from, like, if you're in one of these
A hustler, yeah, hustler.
let's say less no, not even a hustler. It's like a somebody who's connected to government and take advantage of people. Like,
I
that's what
see.
it means, like owner of the business. So I didn't know what the entrepreneur. So I moved to US when I was 22. I was still doing a lot of math, like very theoretical computer science,
Mhm,
computational complexity. That's still one of my favorite topics in the world, like a complexity theory. And then a lot of cryptography. That was like actual crypto, not cryptocurrency. The cryptocurrency came after that. That was just pure foundation of cryptography. I was doing that, and 2000. And I was actually very ignorant about AI. I thought this is a bullshit. I thought this thing all is. I thought it's something between psychology. I didn't get it. I was very
mm,
and I didn't get it all the way until 2016.
mm,
I think 2014 was the year that Goodfellow paper for image generation came, the GANS paper came, and then 2014 I saw this about this is great. Now the AI can generate images, and then 2016 I got more serious, and I had the math background and computer science. It was relatively natural for me to do the switch. And I was working on hypercompute in from high school to bachelor for cryptography and all those. So that whole thing was very natural to me.
mm,
So I switched to AI, and then at the same time, I very I got very curious about health and biotech, and basically, as you start getting older, you start like think, oh, what is the most important thing? And maybe actually living healthy. That is the, and I thought I'll be useless in that world. And I said, okay, I'll do some studying, some research casually. Let's see if I learned something. I was very bad at biology in high school, very, very bad actually. And then I started learning about proteins that I, if I, if I was king of the world, I would have, not king of the world, whatever the authority for this job is, I would have forced every engineer to learn about proteins. Every engineer to learn about. I'll tell you like why. I I got to start. Basically, the first time I learned about proteins, I thought somebody told me. I think it was maybe 2018. Somebody told me. Actually, let me see if I can share. First of all, so this is the first project that actually I did with AI. That I started buying some GPUs for myself. And can you see my screen?
I can. Yep.
These are some abstract paintings that I created. This one in
Uh,
particular I like the most. It's like a pregnant. These are from no prompt. It's just some topics that the AI thinks of itself.
mhm,
And it was my first AI project. I really
uh-huh.
liked it. I thought, wow, the machine can now think and just
Uh,
design images. But that's pretty cool. I paid from my pocket for the GPUs. I thought this is. I had no intention of doing anything commercial. I thought it's just this is super cool. Somebody has to do it, and I have some money. I buy the GPUs and do. I did it. I did that. I joined Facebook 2019 because back then basically there are two good places if you wanted to do AI in a scale was Google and Facebook. That was only, and still I think probably yeah we talked about this. The protein, I want to talk about proteins actually a lot. One of the first, basically, I had some casual interaction with the protein. Where the first time I heard about it, I thought the person, one of the people in Silicon Valley, she was telling me you should learn about protein, and I thought she meant I should sell protein shake. I thought, what a bad idea! Like, why should I go to that? I thought this is a business. Like, you should get into protein shake. I said, why should I do that? And then, yeah, 2000, I started learning about them. And then 2019, the COVID happened, right? 2009. Yeah, early 2020, right?
yep.
Everybody was trying to understand how COVID works. And one of the interesting thing about COVID, and I think it's probably the most central thing about COVID that everybody should know. This thing that is a virus, right? It has a spike protein. There's one protein that comes out of it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 1200 amino acids. Let me ask how many. Anyway, it's like 1200 or 1300 amino acids. Think of it as a formula that, think of it as a text that has 1200 words in it. That is the formula for the spike protein, one of the proteins that comes out of it. This protein is so good at attaching to a receptor in human cell. It's so efficient as a machine in attaching itself to a receptor in your human cells and entering the cell. If you want to summarize the trillions of dollars of damage that caused to the board and all those problems that we have, you remember, like, just we had to wear masks. This is unbelievable, right? For what, like 1 2 years, all those damages was because this machine was so good at grabbing this other machine, right? So these are, when we talk about machines, we're talking about the object that is, I think the COVID is around 100 angstrom long, around, like, by some. So these are, each angstrom is 10 to the minus 10. So these are super super tiny objects we're talking about inside your cell. Like, each of your cell consists of tens of thousands of different types of these machines. So that was COVID, right? So basically, if we knew this object pretty well, we could have done something with it, right? And that was my, when my fascination got more serious. And again, I recommend I think every person who think he or she is an engineer should learn what protein is, because to me, there are machines, they're angstrom scale machines that they're linear, meaning that it's like a human sentence. It's a formula. We can put it on a sequence. It's a sequence, but it's also a 3D shape. The sequence folds in a space and becomes a 3D shape. So it's an information thing, but it's also a geometry shape, right? It's a gap between so many. It's a very paradoxical, I would say, object, right? It's a gap between linear and 3D. It's between information and shape. It's a gap between object and it's information, but it's an object, but it's a function, right? For example, I have a spoon here, right? This spoon it has a shape, it's an object, but it's a function. It does things for, right? So protein is information, like think of it as an IKEA, maybe like assembly code, right? And it's where chemistry becomes biology, right? That thing, it becomes to life because it has a shape and fluidity and dynamism. It comes to life and it starts doing things, starts grabbing things, it starts moving. It does all the functions in your body. So basically, everything that is working in your body is because of the proteins, and everything that is not working when people get cancer or all the diseases, probably because lack of these proteins, or you have too much of them, or they're misshaped, or there's some protein that shouldn't be there. So these machines are somehow, there's something
Mhm.
messed up, right?
So were you starting to study this at Meta? Like, were you digging into
No,
it?
I
Oh, this
actually
is bef
didn't. I was not even aware that. It's very funny that I was researching a lot about before joining the Meta. When I was at Meta, it was the COVID time. You remember, like everybody was trying to do something about COVID. Everybody was going crazy. Everybody was doing something very weird. Like some people were baking cookies, like at home, like all the.
yeah, sourdough bread.
I didn't do that. I
Mhm.
started like talking on Instagram. That was my weird move. Like
Yeah, well, you did
I
really well.
Yeah, it's yeah, some, but like I think everybody found something unique about themselves at that time. It's very actually funny. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't work with Meta's protein team, which they have one of the now it's their own startup, right? So I started this fascination. Basically, protein. Think of it like a zooming back. You have LLMs. So what does AI do, right? AI, think of it as this notebook that has text in it, right? Think of internet as giant, that there are like many of these notebooks and many pages, right? And just for simplification, AI reads page by page. Each page has, I don't know, hundreds of words, and it compiles. It just understands this information, or the relationship, or the first level uh, attention or relationship between words on the higher level, all the abstraction, and it starts learning. It starts learning more abstract, and then it gives it back to you in terms of chat. Now you have other data sources in the words for proteins, right? The first work that was done was the AlphaFold people. The AlphaFold people in 2018, they started this word and they said the sequence, you have a sequence of protein that has a shape, right? It cost a lot of money to figure out this shape, in millions of
Mhm.
dollars back then. They said, what about we get AI to find the attention between all these tokens and all the hot tag map so we can figure out the shape. They did that. Later on, they moved to Transformer. They released AlphaFold 1, AlphaFold 2, AlphaFold 3. AlphaFold 2, basically, they got very close to how we can do in the lab. And then they won the Nobel Prize. The AlphaFold 3 got into atom-wise. They have all sort of versions. But the thing is, uh, they figure out that this is a language, right? It's a perfect match to a transformer architectures. And what people at Meta back then they called ESM did, they started doing the language model, right?
Hmm.
So basically, AlphaFold was a translation between words of sequence to 3D. What Meta did, they said, oh, you can treat this as just sequence, as just giant. Instead of looking only at the PDB data, we can look at all the UniProt 500 million sequences and build a language model. And that language model is going to implicitly understand uh, 3D and also function. It it's a foundation model. And what we did actually, which was very interesting, we started bringing not only sequence and we didn't care about the structure. We actually are one of our thesis was the structure. These transformers are so good at tracking the attentions. Their structure is implicitly understandable by them, understood by them. We said, let's bring all the other data, all the function properties, and all the text on the internet that is around proteins. So we enrich this data. And one of the first things that we learned is basically we can replicate the nature. We can prompt the protein, we can talk to a protein and design. And the protein that are designed is actually very similar to nature. That basically what this tells you is you can replicate the entire billions of years of biology and all the evolution into a one model, right? And one of the metrics that we achieved was if you run the ESM only the language model, you get to four. Basically, at every token with 45% accuracy, you can predict the next amino acid. You have 20 amino acids, so the default model is 5%. If you do a little bit better than default, you get to 10%. 45 is pretty good. What we got was 61% if you injected the text information. This is what Jensen talked about showed in his keynote, and Lisa this year she talked about, and the latest version was on AMD GPU. The previous one was an NVIDIA GPU. So that shows by 61% per token accuracy, you can predict the next token. You basically can design a new protein if you give it the text around the protein, if the text is actually rich enough. You can design this biology board. So we're moving toward fully programmability of like biology and next generation of these cancer drugs or every other sort of therapeutics, right? But
But
if
when
you
did you're like, "Hey, I can't work at Facebook anymore. I need to go all in on proteins." When did that realization hit you?
that was probably I think it happened very fast. I think in 2021, basically I left and there was no funding, nothing at that point. I said, look, let me go. And actually one of the I would say probably one thing that I regret the most is why I started the company. I strongly recommend people to actually go after their curiosity a lot and do research and then call it a company. It gives you a lot like yeah. And yeah, and it was a very different path than what I thought. And we basically build the models, and what we learned is the biotech, they don't care much about models. They care about you have to build the molecules and you have to take them to the labs. We in last 18 months, we took the result of the MP4, which was fourth generation, the one that designed on MI 250 GPUs. That we got we actually narrowed down to 1,000 fully AI designed proteins that took them to the lab. They got 84% expression. Basically, 84% of the time they come to life and they have a structure and they're soluble and they have all the good properties of a natural protein, which is very high number for a fully AI designed protein. So basically, this is completely digitally imagined protein,
Mm.
right? They showed all the good properties of natural protein, and none of them are copies of the nature. And then we started building two catalogs of actual drugs, one for weight loss, the GLP-1, and one for logic gated for cancer therapies. That they're very, very early, but uh, those are basically actual drugs that we designed with AI, and they're going through the lab works.
Well, what are you most excited about now in what you're currently working on at 3? I love your slogan, by the way, where it said, "Nature didn't have time, but we have GPUs."
We think the biology, if you digitize it, right? If you move the biology from lab to GPUs, it can accelerate it a lot. And it
That's
takes a
right.
lot of scaling. And people say, oh, this is not real. You still need to, yes, you still need to take it to the lab, but you can accelerate 95% of job and scale it to a lot more molecules. And make the process engineerable and designable rather than you just testing narrow groups of proteins. So it's a completely the future of therapeutic is completely different with AI. And I think the part that you said, I think there's one more thing that is missing. There's one piece of puzzle that is actually, I'm happy that I think in last 2-3 months, this piece of the puzzle is getting out there. And that's, I call it what I talked about at the beginning. I call it the angstrom scale or quantum scale word models, right? So an AI that understands molecules, large molecules, up to protein, large proteins, antibodies, all of that, and it understands it in a high resolution, right? In a generative way, it can generate it in a multimodal way that it can understand proteins, it can understand small molecules, all of that. But it's multi-scale that it can zoom in and zoom out. But more importantly, is super high res, meaning that your antibody, which antibody is probably we think of it as a box, as an object of size in different dimension, probably between 20 to 100 angstrom, which is in that word is a larger object. All the way you zoom into a carbon atom that is 1 angstrom, but I think it's 1.4 angstrom is the diameter of carbon atom, depends how you look at it. And then you zoom a lot more in and look at the electrons. Because if you want to actually model the binding accurately and you want to see all the energy functions and all the interaction and all of that, you need that level of accuracy. And now you're with the GPUs, you can do that. There are all these, I see all these DFT works, basically DFT calculations, quantum calculations that coming from Meta, all these open data sets that are coming. People started looking into quantum chemistry and mechanic and looking at the quantum scale modeling using the GPUs, right? I think we're probably, I would say we are probably 2-3 versions of architecture and GPU progression to be able to model such big objects, and by I mean 100 angstrom into quantum scale. It's very ambitious, but I think we can get there. I call it 2-3. That's what I'm most excited about these days. So super high res molecule design and interaction.
And what's needed to get there?
A lot bigger GPUs, a much better, I would say, a specialized architecture. I call it the multi-scale is I think is a big keyword. And another thing that I think it needs to be translated from other fields to this is this whole concept of reinforcement learning, synthetic data generation. I think the synthetic data generation comes through all these Schrodinger's and all these MD simulations and all those physics formula data generation. I think that's one thing. The whole going back, having multiple models going back with the environment in a digital fashion, similar to what we do with gaming and coding. I think that's a thing that I'm very excited about. And bigger GPUs and bigger, yeah, a lot more people I think should come to this space, basically.
So as we are kind of moving forward here, I know the question on everybody's mind is, AI is going to do, a lot of people are nervous. Is it going to take our jobs? Is it going to do all this crazy stuff? But one of the questions people do have is, what good is it going to do? And the one thing they're asking, when is it going to cure cancer? And what is it going to take to cure cancer? And do we have line of sight to be able to cure cancer with tools like this?
So I think the pharma and tech has the huge gap between them. So this was one of my friends who worked at both industries told me one time. He said the reason there is such a big gap is if you're a software engineer, you write 3 lines of JavaScript and then I don't know, something starts moving in your page, you're happy, right? If you want to do the smallest thing in biotech and pharma, that's 10 years. Something that is 10 seconds in software, that's 10 years in. And for that, the mentalities are very different. And it took me 4 years of my life to learn that. And I saw Jensen of NVIDIA in one of the Biotech conference. I think he called Biotech people angry and sad or some
Oh,
combination.
no. Why? Why did he do that?
Maybe he was frustrated in that particular moment, but and he said something funny. He said all of your keywords are inhibit and they're just angry keywords. And I really get is like every time I go to tech, like I was with your CEO the other day. One thing I liked about him, I said, "Oh, we should do the model saving." He said, "Why model saving? That's boring." I like that. That's how tech people talk, right? So, oh, this is boring. This is not fun. We should do something bigger. Every time you're with like actual good tech people, that's the language they use. Oh, this is boring. This is not fun. We should do something bigger. Why don't we do
That's
it
right.
10x and 100x? Oh, you want to release this in 6 months? Why don't we release it tonight? Like that's how good tech people think, right?
That's
But
right.
in biotech, it's the opposite. The good biotech, the senior biotech, they're always, oh, this is not going to happen. This is going to take longer. Than it's going to need. You're going to need more funding. You're never going to get this with $5 million in tech. Oh, you want to like a $500, like this start a company. Uh,
That's right.
and there is this cultural gap, and it's huge. And uh, I don't want to like one of my first meetings in biotech that it was actually I can say it because the person who invited us actually did a good job at that. She was, I think, interim C2 of Microsoft. She was pretty senior person, invited me to a meeting. And in the meeting, there were some doctors, some MDs and some pharma people. And it was very early, yes, that I got into biotech. And one of them called me. He said, I gave him all my ideas, and he said, "You look like a monkey who's trying to ski a mountain backward," something like that.
Oh, no.
Yeah. After I gave a full presentation, that was his thing to me.
So
And
that's what I mean by angry and sad, huh? That's
I'm very I just laughed. I thought that's a funny image. I like monkeys, so I said, "You're you're trying to insult me by telling me I'm a monkey. I don't even dislike that. I like monkeys." And yeah, and
they
then
have a good life. They have a good life.
and the person who invited, she was interim CTO of Microsoft. I don't know what is her role now. She was a very senior person. She emailed me after the meeting and she apologized. I said, "There is no apology. It's fine. But your guest just told me I'm a monkey. That's fine." So the thing is, this cultural gap is huge, right? And that was 4 years. I've seen it almost in every meeting. I think the gap, I learned how to fill up the gap a lot. I learned how to talk to them. Hopefully, I'm still learning it, but the gap is there. One thing that I talk to your team and I'm talking to everybody, I think there are all these models that needs to be built, right? There's a culture gap, there's a human gap, there are the models, the foundation models, and all the other models that needs to be built. But there's also what I now Palantir calls it AIP, the AI platforms that needs to be built. I think on a consumer side, right, what pharma companies need, on a let's not call it pharma company, let's call it the biotech scientist ones. They want all these models served, all the computational tools. They want access in a visual and LLM accessible fashion, right? A chat GPT, let's call it for biotech. That's what they want. And what corporate wants is they want all the resource management, collaboration, knowledge sharing. Basically, knowledge sharing, what does knowledge sharing mean? What it means that if Amgen or Merck, they have 2,000 or they have more scientists, the LLM should pick up all the things that everybody has done and connect all this information. There's a lot of inefficiency in there. And not only between all the current employees, between all the employees of all the ex-employees. Such thing doesn't happen. That information is so siloed. I think that AIP, whoever builds that, it needs to be built. I think we're gonna have that. Basically, it's a GPU wrapper. It's a GPU and LLM wrapper, and I think that's pharma people need to
Yeah.
on top of foundation models. That's one of the
Yeah.
gaps. It's a business, more of a businessy thing than a technical thing. I recommended you guys
It seems
building
like
it.
it's a big opportunity. Like pharma, there's clearly a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time to go through the testing. And with something like this, it could definitely help speed up that timeline, reduce the cost, and make things that are more effective.
Yeah, basically think about the need is great. Like human health, super important. Nobody doubts that, right? And I think pharma is. I looked at one time, $1.6 trillion market. It's a big, like if you add all the drugs of the world, it's huge. If you add the market cap of the top 10 pharma company, I think now it's a little bit less, but you have I think you have 10 up 100 billion plus pharma companies. It's huge. They need a lot of simulation. Basically, you're talking about molecules in a very complex system. You need a lot of simulation. Hence, you need a, they say it's so complex, and but I think that that's exactly why you need more AI and more compute, because human brain cannot look at 4 or 5 different things at the same time. If you're simulating a COVID spike that is 1,200 pieces, you need AI for that, right? There's no other way around. The need is there. The solution is AI and GPU, but somebody has to give them the tools, right? It cannot be just, oh, this is the foundation, this is AlphaFold, go build your drugs. It needs to be, somebody needs to build the accessibility layer. Otherwise, they're not, the adoption will be very hard.
Well, let's do it.
Yeah, it's basically on the positive side of your question. Uh, I think, but my deadline is, I said this first at uh, NVIDIA Life Science Day. Uh, that was, I think, maybe 2024, maybe 2 years ago. And I'm still by my deadline. I think by 2030, we are going to have technology of curing or mitigating 50% plus of the cancers. And the way, I think the core technology is, I call it molecule programming, meaning that in a very high res, in a multimodal way, you can talk to the environment, you can talk to small molecules, to the proteins, and in the cell environment or whatever environment, and tell this molecule to do what exactly for you, and program many things into it. And this is like, when you get into cancer, I don't want to get into too much details, but you need to have your molecules being able to attached to 2 different types of receptors, for example. These are the things, and you want to be able to program this in a very high res way. I think that molecule programming, that's the biggest piece. The AIP part, the platform, the accessibility, you need a platform, so these
Yeah.
are accessible to the world. Uh, you need faster and more scalable, and probably more AI in the loop testing, right? All the way from chemistry all the way to animal testing. And then at the end, you need much faster clinical trials. That's something that is a big bottleneck. I think if you build this for, uh, by 2030, you have the pieces, right? You have the pieces to, let's call it, cure cancer. And by quantifiably, I mean 50% of types of cancers you can mitigate it, meaning that if somebody is diagnosed with that type of cancer 50% of the time, and I'm being conservative, you can mitigate it so it comes down to a flu.
Fascinating. Well, it sounds like we're on the right track to be able to do a lot of good.
You have 8,000 GPUs, so i
Do
i
we get
told, get the, that's, I think we need a lot more people to come to this field, and a lot
Yeah,
of GPUs. So 8,000 is,
it's a
I'll
start.
get it from, yeah.
8,000 is a start, but there's clearly, like you said, creating the AI platforms to give tools and resources to the pharma companies, to use what's necessary to be able to cure some of these larger diseases. And we're just getting started, and I'm excited about it, man. But my big takeaway is to see how you followed your curiosity to this place that's leading to, creating a better good. You didn't expect to be here, 3, 5, 6 years ago. And
Yeah,
I'm
wow.
excited about where we're going to be in the next 5 years by 2030 to see, if we hit this deadline and, the opportunities that we can create as a result of AI and accelerating that process and helping with what, government and legislation and all the red tape necessary, or the red tape not necessary, but red tape that's in the way of causing progress to happen. I like it. I'm down. Somebody needs to do it. Who's going to do it?
We start
And
with your 8K
that's
MI.
right.
What are
And
they? MI 300 or what?
325s. We have 8K
325.
325s. We
That's
got
even better.
thousands of the 355s coming online. So GPUs aren't the issue. We just now need to have the people, the data, and the platforms necessary to give the tools to the hands of the people to help this greater good. Well, Koosh, I appreciate you taking the time, man. I could
Yeah,
sit here and
thank you.
talk.
This
I
was
know
a
you've
good
you've
conversation.
you've stoked my curiosity. I'm going to dig in and start studying proteins, and
I'll come to Vegas one day to hang
I
out
like
with
it. You need to come out here. One question I always ask all the guests we've had so far is, and it just kind of has to do with the title of this, is what does Beyond Cuda mean to you?
you. I think the software is one thing, right? The whole CUDA versus ROCm, all of that. I think the ecosystem.
Mm,
Basically, this GPU, what I told about Jensen, and I think Lisa is onto this, right? You need to bring people, the people dimension, the ecosystem building, the vertical ecosystem building around the GPUs. The bare metal is they're making a lot of machine, a lot of money. You're gonna need a lot more and more. You're gonna be a lot more impactful if you connect the GPUs to the right developers.
that's right. I agree, man. Well, hey, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about what you're working on?
Kushiar at almost every. So my full name is Kushar, Kooshiar. I go by Kush, but I'm Kooshiar at every platform. That's my
Love it.
first name, and it's not very common, so I get it in on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Twitter, X, on whatever, DoorDash. I don't know, Open Table, whatever.
Oh,
Like,
DoorDash. Yeah, please.
yeah, I'm not on. I don't think they have a handle, but I'm on every app at Kush. YouTube everywhere.
I love it. Well, I'm excited to continue to follow your journey as we continue this war on cancer, and excited to see more about what you're working on at 310 and all of the rest of the
Yeah, yeah.
opportunities that
Thank you for
exist.
doing this.
Thank you for thank you for having me, man. We'll
Have a
talk
good night.
soon.